What's going on, everyone? So I made a video diving into the potential of Stu Macher returning to the Scream franchise. Now, again, I'm not big on it. I don't really want it to happen, but just kind of what we're seeing here, the 30th anniversary, the direction in which these rumors seem to be heading, and if you were ever going to do it, now would be the time. Right? If you were ever going to bring Stu back, now would be the time to bring him back. Again, however, like I talked about, I don't want to see him just like back. Like I just want the explanation. I want the insight. I want the story. That's why I've talked about, like, I'd like to see, if he's gonna be the Ghostface mastermind or whatever, kind of that be the cliffhanger at the end. Where Thanos grabs the glove and says, "I'll do it myself." Right? These 2 or 3 Ghostface end up failing. Stu's like, it's time for me to come out of the shadows and take over or whatever, right? So that way you can kind of start laying the sort of breadcrumbs, lay the little Easter eggs, and then have the big reveal. And then now we know Scream 8 is going to be really Stu-centric. And then now you have, kind of the story build up. You have the reveal. And then now you can start getting into the details and the meat and potatoes, into like the stew, and kind of explain everything that you need to explain. I'd rather see it not rushed. I'd rather see it done correctly. Good writing, good execution, good storytelling can solve a lot and kind of, make anything work. But it's just, after all this time, why now? Like, no one's mentioned him. It's a little silly to me still. But let's remove my dislike for the idea of Stu returning. If Stu is to return, I actually like the idea of a redemption arc more than him just coming back and killing again, right? For a couple reasons. One, right, like, where has he been? And it took him 30 years to plan this? Like, that's my biggest problem, is Stu coming back and being Ghostface again, right? Like, if he was locked away in prison for the last 30 years, right? Let's say that's the reason. Like, so he's just been planning and plotting for 30 years. Because, again, it's not like there's all these Ghostface that have been going after Sydney to where Stu can be the orchestrator, and it's like, oh yes, I was manipulating behind the scenes in prison, right? Like what they wanted to do in Scream 3 originally, right? Like where he was kind of the mastermind and he had all these kids. Was it The Following was the idea? But that hasn't happened. Sydney wasn't attacked until the last time she was actually like a target, not even the target, was the Jill situation, right? Like, so again, like, what? Stu just had this plan and then just decided not to go through with it for 30 years and then got out of prison and was like, I'm finally going to get Sydney now. I just think that's silly. Like, I just think that's ridiculous, right? He's been just rotting in prison for 30 years. Just all he's thought about is getting back at Sydney. Also, it doesn't fit Stu's character, right? Stu was manipulated. He even says himself, it's peer pressure, right? Like, he did it because of Billy. He didn't do it because he was this mastermind. No, he did. Billy got Stu as the patsy, right? Roman explained it, right? I told you got to get a guy to fall in case things hit the fan or whatever, however he phrased it, right? Like, that was the thing. Like, Stu was never this, like, yes, he was dark. Yeah, he had some demons. Yeah, he was a monster. But it wasn't his idea. He didn't come up with the plan of like, we should do it. Roman manipulated Billy, and Billy manipulated Stu in order to get Stu to be the fall guy. So it just doesn't even fit the story of the original. So to me, I like the idea more of Stu Macher as this redemption character. Now, obviously, look, Sidney Prescott is never going to buy Stu as like reform, and even if he is, Sydney's still never going to accept him. But That's the beauty of it. That would be the fun struggle and dynamic where Stu is freed. There is a Ghostface attack, right? Stu gets out 30 years to the anniversary. So now Sydney's on high alert. Sydney's stressed. She's watching her kids. She knows, like, oh man, Stu's out. Like, what is he gonna do? Is he playing something? Boom, Ghostface shows up. Boom, Ghostface starts attacking, right? Sydney thinks it's Stu. It's Stu. It's got to be Stu. Like, this isn't a coincidence, right? Stu's kind of looked at as like the fall guy, right? Maybe even Ghostface starts to attack Sydney because Stu is free, right? And he can kind of use Stu as the fall guy. He kind of use Stu as the alibi, right? Like, and now you have this onslaught. Stu is also a target of Ghostface, right? And now you're in this situation where Stu's the only one that can really help you, right? So you have this Gale and Sydney centric film with Stu helping Sydney and Gale, right? But there is this conflict, there is this struggle, there is this lack of trust, right? Sydney doesn't buy Stu and is keeping an eye on Stu, right? Maybe there's a scene where, Sydney goes and roughs Stu up or something, but Stu still, he wants to prove like he's not that guy anymore, right? He's reformed, he's changed, right? He's kind of like the new Cotton Weary, just with like a better overall story, in my opinion. Right? I like the idea more of, instead of having Stu just be this mastermind orchestrating behind the scenes when that wasn't his character to begin with. Right? Like, he wanted to be cool, he wanted to be popular, he wanted the attention, he wanted the recognition, he wanted Billy to love him, he wanted those things, right? Like, he was easily manipulated and influenced, so much so that he was able to, like, he wasn't the mastermind. So, again, like, you're going to take the guy that was just nothing more than the fall guy, and now make him this even greater mastermind than ever before, when that wasn't really Stu's character. He was kind of the goofy idiot, right, that was turned killer. And, now I like the idea more of, and I just think it fits better with Stu as the hero, right? Like, and we know Sydney's never going to accept Stu. Like, Stu took everything from Sydney, right? Like, there's rumors that Sydney's daughter's name is Tatum, right? Like, but imagine that type of struggle. Imagine that frustration where, like, the only way I can save my family is to trust the guy that took everything, right? Like, this guy ruined my life. This guy murdered everyone I loved. But the only way I can keep my family safe, the only way I can keep Tatum safe, the only way I can do all these things is to work with this guy. That's such a great story. That's such a great buildup. That's, there's so much tension, right? Like, maybe Sydney at the end, like, she, let's say, Stu saves her, and, she has this gun and Stu's dying, and now Sydney's got to have this moment where it's like, do I finish the job? Do I just let him sit here and die, and, or do I help him? Right? Do I be the better person, and the person that hurt me and took my friends and my loved ones and started this chain of constant attacks and all this stuff? Like, if it wasn't for him, I might have a real normal life. I may not have had the struggles. My mother might have still been alive. Like, all these things, right? If it wasn't for him and Billy, right? Like, it's just like, you start, like, it just would be such a powerful scene, in my opinion, right? Where Sydney has this ultimatum. Sydney has this moment where, she's infuriated. All she wants to do, like, maybe she even had a conversation with Gale and talked to Gale and told Gale, like, as soon as I get an opportunity to kill him, I'm going to kill him. Like, I'm going to end this, right? He's gone, right? I'm going to take him out, whatever. And she has her shot, she has her moment, and she just doesn't do it because that's just not who she is. Like, I mean, look, you can make an argument she's more of a serial killer than all the I mean, she's killed more, she has more blood on her hands than all the killers combined, right? Like, Sydney at this point, she has no problem killing somebody. But I just think that would be such an interesting struggle to see her deal with, right? It'd be such an interesting position to see her in. Like, they're never going to be friends. They're never going to be, even really acquaintances. But Stu gets his redemption. Stu gets his story. Stu gets his kind of, proper send-off, right, with Sydney. Maybe, or you could keep having him come back, right? Like, Ghostface attacks or whatever, right? Like, there's a million ways to do that, right? Like, you could have Stu kind of be the new Dewey-esque character. Not in the sense of, like, replace Dewey, but in the sense of, like, that male that's, like, the final guy, right? Like, you could go that route. There's just a lot of creativity here if you approach it the right way with Stu. Again, I'm still not a fan of it. Still don't really like the idea. But if you were going to do it, right, if it's inevitable and it's going to happen sooner rather than later, right, like, then I think that, personally, I think the redemption arc is just so much better, right? Like, yes, the cliffhanger reveal at the end would be epic, but I think just to have the general overall story and also the potential for, Stu lovers to continue to have him return, right? Again, I like Stu as a character. I love Stu as a character. Matthew Lillard, man, that dude's one of the greatest human beings we've seen, right? Like, it's not that I don't like Stu. It's that, I just think it's pointless at this point. It's been 30 years and we haven't heard a peep about him. Nothing. The only thing we know is that he died in Scream 96. Right? Like, and now they're going to kind of retcon that. Like, which they can. I'm not saying they can't. Like, it's possible, and you can explain it, and you can do it. It's just a lot to do. And then on top of that, he comes back, and he wants to kill Sydney and everybody again. Right? When it's like, that's not even really who he was. Right? Like, how many people did Stu even really kill in the first one? Right? It was mostly Billy, right? Like, it's just, Stu had his demons, but, it wasn't, like, he wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to start killing people. It was Billy and his love for Billy and, the acceptance that he wanted to gain from Billy, right? Like, now, 30 years later, he's had time in prison. Like, he's probably moved past that. Right? He's really just sitting in prison for 30 years, dwelling on coming after Sydney again. Well, as soon as I get out, like, I just think it's silly. And again, it's not like Sydney's been attacked, over and over and over and over again. And we've gotten 3 films where Sydney's been the main target and all this. The last 3 films, Sydney wasn't. Like, Sydney wasn't in Scream 6, Scream 5. Sydney wasn't the main target. Sydney inserted herself. And in Scream 4, she was a target. She wasn't the target, right? Jill's whole plan was for her to kind of be the target and then basically take on Sydney's life and have, frame Trevor. Like, Trevor was the main target. Trevor was the guy, right? Like, Trevor was the one that was the patsy and the fall guy and all that stuff, right? Like, so, again, I just, could you argue Stu maybe put it in Jill's head? But, like, I just think that that's silly. It's like, we haven't seen Stu in 30 years. Just to, like, randomly have him come back, and then on top of him randomly coming back, him randomly wanting to kill everybody, I just think it's a little silly. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like the idea of, like, give Stu a redemption arc? Do you think, no, he has to be the killer, he has to be the Ghostface, he has to be the mastermind? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.